President Joe Biden's falling polling numbers. A lot of that really started with the, as some people call the debacle, when it came to pulling out of Afghanistan. Bottom line is this here: Afghanistan was never going to be a nice pullout. It was always going to be full of drama. But it hasn't had tremendous impact. And he did have the courage to say enough is enough when it comes to the war, in terms of how we're operating. Rula Jebreal, she is a phenomenal journalist. You've seen her on many other networks and other shows as well, in terms of really dealing with this issue of Afghanistan, the Middle East, what our foreign policy looks like. Rula, I've been trying to have you on the show for years. Finally glad to have you on. So let's talk about in terms of where we are. And I'm going to use that Democrat-Republican sort of deal here. Democrats, in many ways, try to operate Republican light. Either you're going to be a Democrat or you're going to be a Republican. Now we see when it comes to foreign policy how they've done the go along to get along, how we've spent trillions of dollars, nothing to show for it. Your assessment on how the media went after Joe Biden, called it a massive failure, and now how does this set up what we do now going forward to get people to understand that, look, it may have been messy, but we needed to end that crazy war 20 years in Afghanistan?
Roland, finally, good to meet you. So let me start by saying it is astonishing. It's truly astonishing that we're talking about so-called progressive Democrat. We're talking about $3 trillion, but no one, and it's another failure of top of failure of 20 years war on terror. Both chambers just approved $7.5 trillion in budget, in defense budget for the United States over the next 10 years. Regardless, the failure in Afghanistan, regardless the defeat of and the failure and the catastrophic humanitarian catastrophe that was created as consequence of this war on terror, regardless the fact that our investment, trillions of dollars in Afghanistan and Iraq, basically was obliterated. We had a government in Afghanistan that ran off in 2 seconds. The people who are holding the line are actually the women. And I'm saying this because people, progressives or so-called progressive, who don't want to invest in uplifting people from poverty in the United States. They don't want to basically fight against climate change that is literally killing 7 million people every year. They don't want to defend Americans against poverty, against all kind of issues here at home, but they're willing unanimously, unconditionally give more trillions of dollars to an apparatus, to the defense industry that produced nothing except desperation, radicalization, and nothing else. If we look at the war on terror and we look how everybody is jumping at the throat of President Biden for ending something that we knew was going from worse to worse, that was producing nothing, jumping at his throat is another failure of journalism and of our corporate media that wants to engage in these countries on one issue, how to bomb more. Instead of building schools or bridges overseas, or give scholarships, or building human infrastructure, or investing in the next generation, we are willing to invest trillions of dollars, $7 trillion in bombs and helicopters and uniforms and missiles. When is this going to be debated and discussed? When is this ever going to be questioned? Because so far, keep repeating the same mistake, hoping in a different outcome, and we're becoming crazier and crazier. I mean, I understand why Republicans are crazy somehow. I see that they create their own, echo chamber of narrative, and they have propaganda machine that brainwash them. But what about progressives and Democrats? I mean, I cannot fathom why in the 21st century it is so hard to take from trillionaires and billionaires and give a little bit more to average Americans who don't want their children to die in these wars. By the way, these are the people that lost their children and fought in these wars, and now they are slipping into poverty. When is this going ever to be debated in mainstream media?
You know, it's very interesting, Rula. When I ran the Dallas Weekly, there were some independent journalists who went to Iraq, and they brought back these really haunting images of Iraqis who sustained so many lost lives. And I remember I think I did probably about a 6 or 8 page spread, and folks were calling me, "This is propaganda. You're putting this out." And I said, whoa, wait a minute, hold up. I said, so we're not to talk about the hundreds of thousands of Iraqis who were killed? Even this drone strike. Okay, the United States lied. Oh, we took out someone who's about to do a car bomb. Then they had to walk in after reporting, came back. No, they killed 10 innocent Afghans. And what gets me is I listen to these Republicans, so-called pro-life, who don't give a damn that 10 Afghans were killed in a drone strike, 7 children, and it's like, no big deal. And one of the greatest mistakes that President Obama has not been fully held accountable for were the drone strikes that he also authorized that were killing innocent people. We cannot be so pro-America that we don't give a damn when thousands upon thousands of people, innocent people, are being killed because under the guise of the war on terror.
Listen, I agree with you totally. I think it is, it's one of the things that I always wondered why somehow it is acceptable that brown and black people overseas can get bombed, live under military occupation, get tortured, killed. And it is okay somehow to depict that as, yeah, it is what it is. But in the name of national security and stability in the Middle East, how is that ever produced anything except insecurity, radicalization, etc.? If we look at our foreign policy and our policies towards especially brown and black Muslims, it is no different than Jim Crow. It is no different than our racist policies here in the United States. When you deny people the right to vote here, but then you enable a dictator over there who basically not only deny the vote, rule for 30, 40 years like Sisi, and you keep pumping money into his coffers. We're basically sending a message to all of these people: you deserve dictatorship. You deserve to live as slaves in your own countries. I will never forget, Ronald. I was in Cairo when President Obama gave the speech. One of my assistants, because I was working there at the time, kept listening to the speech. And I asked him at one moment, why are you listening to the speech? And he said, Rula, this guy is black like myself. This guy's father is a Muslim like me. He can be president in his country and I cannot vote. And I realized that our foreign policy is a consequence of our white nationalist policies, domestic policies that reigned and continue to reign and continue to be part of America's DNA.
Speak. Say that. I mean, that's just being real about our foreign policy. I want to bring in my panel here because I want them to ask a question. Each of them to ask a question of you, Rula. I'm going to start with Michael. Michael, go right ahead.
Hello, Rula. Hey, thanks for coming on today. You know, I was reading a statement from Senator Jeff Merkley about Afghan refugees and about aid being given to Afghan refugees coming to the U.S. Can you, and then also at the same time, we look at how Haitians have been treated and Haitians being deported, even though about 12,000 have been allowed to stay here and apply for political asylum. Can you talk about the discrepancy in the way Afghans are treated, refugees coming here, and Haitians, and put that into context?
Look, it's this continuation of the same policy that the United States enacted after 9/11. And if you look at it this way, in the 60s, people like you and me and Ronald and everybody that is on this panel was treated as not only second-class citizens, as somehow is a foreigner in this country. Trump rose to power by delegitimizing the first African-American president in this nation, calling him, he couldn't be American. Guess what? Because he's black. He was saying the private part loudly somehow, and he was, camouflaging his language, using a different language. But this is no different than these people marching in Charlottesville saying, Jews will not replace us. Anybody that is different in this country is an illegitimate somehow voter or is stealing something or somehow can't be an American. So our war on terror and which is our foreign policy, by the way, and our refugee policy are the same part of this that stems from the same doctrine. And the doctrine is called white supremacist. It's entrenched in the DNA. Every 2 years, Republicans find something to discuss, gay marriage, something to distract their base with. Today, what is it? Critical race theory. Exactly. Every 2 years, they find a boogeyman, and the boogeyman is always a black man or a black woman to rally against. It was the Afghans, or it was the Iraqis, it was bin Laden. I mean, the failure of our media not to make people understand that Iraq had nothing to do with 9/11. And Saddam Hussein, as horrible as he was, had nothing to do with 9/11. But in order to sell that war, they need to sell lies after lies. Are we surprised that Trump is selling different lies? These lies started with a war on terror. We normalized the kind of lies that Trump decided to jump and decide to lie about the identity of the first African-American president. And now he's lying about the elections, about millions of people voting. Who is he talking about? He's talking about us, about you, me, Ronald, and every black man and woman in this country. In his eyes, in the eyes of the white supremacists, we are illegals, illegitimate invaders. This is no different than, and we belong where, in his eyes? In these camps that he established on the border of Texas. The way they are treating the Haitian refugees, if we look at history books, there's no difference than what they treated our brothers and sisters in the South during slavery. It's no different.
Thank you.
Kelly.
Sure. Thank you for coming on. My question originally was regarding Haiti, but another thing that I have been struggling to understand is how, like you said, almost $7 trillion, I believe, has been approved to spend on defense over the course of 10 years, but we can't come to a number of $3 trillion for infrastructure and things happening in this country, specifically Manchin saying, quote, he doesn't want to change society to an entitlement mentality. It is frustrating to me on many fronts how he's the senator for, if not the poorest state in the country, certainly one of the top 5 poorest states in the country, for him to consider $3 trillion the programs that would fund as entitlement. I can't imagine what his constituents are feeling right now regarding those statements, if they even understand them. But the dissociation from what is and what you want, especially when it comes to senators and congressmen against raising the limit on the infrastructure bill number to $3 trillion. The dissociation with that is really, really jarring. So I just want to know what your thoughts are on about that, and what can congressmen possibly do at this juncture to really hold strong to the $3 trillion number?
Thank you for this question. Actually, Democrats' agenda and the progressive agenda is being derailed sadly. And I say this, and it's the continuation of U.S. policy since the 80s, since 1980s, whereby you have some politicians, Sinema and Manchin, some of them, somehow managed to positions themselves in a way where billionaires, corporations, their lobbyists can actually buy off politicians. And it is called legal. And what they want to enshrine, consolidate inequality in this nation. At the expense of who? Working class Americans who are basically slipping into deep poverty. Think of this. And I always think of this, and it really, coming from the Middle East, especially where we are on the receiving end of that expense budget, you know, where basically we use that expense budget to bomb to oblivion entire countries. I think of Yemen. It's being bombed now. The poorest country in the Middle East is being bombed with American bombs that are being given to Saudi Arabia or sold, or somehow we help them. There's so many countries that were destroyed. So we talk about life, but we don't care about that life. But I'm thinking about the sheer volume of that money. I mean, $7.5 trillion over 10 years, giving unconditionally, without any conditions, to the defense, you know, basically industry that we know that a lot of them are deeply corrupt, but we're unwilling to invest in human infrastructure and to uplift people from poverty, or even to pass saving people's lives and save our planet. How is that hard? You know, I think of Senator Manchin, and I think of the poverty of the people that elected him, voted for him, and how he doesn't care. Because cinema, as we speak, is hosting a fundraising with these lobbyists who are, and all of these industries that want to tank Biden agenda. What she is doing, after tweeting for decades and telling progressives that she would fight for the poor and basically people who are marginalized, she arrives there and she starts cashing on the fact that she is derailing and tanking that agenda. I mean, how corrupt this person can be. And one of the reasons why I get so frustrated is who vet these people? There is no vetting process to understand who are we getting elected. Where's the Democratic Party? What are you doing? And believe me, it's not, for me at this point, it's whether they pass the infrastructure bill. If they pass it without reconciliation bill, we're done. We're through. Basically, they're paving the way for Trump to come back. And if he comes back, it's Hitler again. After he managed to do the first coup, Trump tried that coup and he failed, but the next time they will not fail. And I'm telling you, it's not going to be about infrastructure planet. He's going to do exactly what every fascist dictator did around the world. He's going to be, at this point, he's going to purge basically every agency and put his loyalists, and there will be there will be no good people next time to stand up for the Constitution. So Cinema and Manchin are not only derailing the agenda, they are willing to gamble with our lives and basically destroy democracy. I will blame them for the rest of our lives, and history will not be kind to them, because if Trump and Republicans get elected, guess what? They have to say goodbye to democracy, to America's democracy and the American experiment. And I believe the violence we've seen is nothing compared to the violence that is coming. I predicted Trump victory in 2015. I saw the language. I saw what he was trying to do. I predicted the violence of January 6th because the writings are on the wall. And what's coming is even worse.
Faraji, your question for Rula.
Yes, Rula, thank you so much for joining us here on the show. I just had a question in regards to a very interesting part of this infrastructure bill as it relates to Israel. Robert Wetzler, who is the president of the S. Daniel Abraham Center on the Middle East Peace in Washington, wrote an op-ed just a couple of days ago for the New York Times talking about the fact that progressive Democrats are now raising some real concerns about the relationship between the United States and Israel. They put it in as part of the country's infrastructure bill. And Rula, tell me, what do you see as being what do you take from this? But they put it as part of this bill that is supposed to be for domestic issues to give Israel $1 billion to fix and support the Iron Dome missile defense system right there in Israel as part of this unflinching, unwavering support for Israel. They didn't do this for any other country. There hasn't been any other monies allocated for any other part of the region or part of the world. But what do you make of this? What are you seeing as being the future of this relationship now that progressives are saying not just, hey, why are we giving this money, but why are we still continuing to support Israel in spite of the fact of the latest flare-up that happened back in May? What do you take from this, Rula?
Listen, it is, again, it's incredible that Israel is more important than uplifting people from poverty, than pre-K, than dental care for the elderly, than basically anything in America. And again, what is Israel is about today? It is an ethno-nationalist state of purity and exclusion. It is a military occupying power that subjugates millions of people in the West Bank and Gaza who have no right whatsoever. Even Israeli organizations are calling it apartheid. We are funding an apartheid state, and we're unashamed about it. The entire world voted at the United Nations General Assembly to make Palestine a state, voted for statehood, except the United States. And we're looking at the United States, the country that abolished slavery and elected an African-American man and elected the most multiracial, multi-ethnic democracy, is looking at an ethnocracy and basically a Jewish supremacist state and saying, yeah, we don't mind that. We will bankroll that. We don't mind that. We don't mind that you're caging people and stripping them of every right, killing them left and right, bombing them to oblivion, because basically, which is a continuation of the war on terror somehow, but in the name of the war on terror, we're enslaving people over and again. But it's no different than giving the dictator in Egypt the $2 billion, knowing every year, knowing that he torture, abduct, rape, and kill people. We don't care. 70,000 political prisoners live in his dungeons. We know they're being tortured and raped and assaulted. We know all of that. Regardless of that, Trump called him my favorite dictator, and we continue to give him the money because we don't care about black and brown people overseas. We're willing to put these autocrats, but we don't want an autocrat or a dictator in America. So if you don't want a dictator in America, why do you think Palestinians want a dictator? Why you keep emboldening other dictators and apartheid states overseas? And then we go after Rashida Tlaib or Ilhan Omar and others. Surprise, surprise, the black people in the Senate, in Congress, and tell them that they are anti-Semites. Anti-Semitism is being weaponized to shut down any criticism of Israel. Guess what? Modern political ideology is not people, and it's not a religion. These are two separate things. Every country, every government, every state should be criticized, should be scrutinized, and should be transparent. And if you shut down the debate in name of hatred against a religious group of people, you're basically conflating these two things and helping. I will never forget, and to your question, when Charlottesville happened, Trump defended these neo-Nazis who said Jews will not replace us. And he was praised by Jewish leadership saying, you know, he's the most pro-Israeli. Guess what? Because he gave money for the occupation. How can you reconcile these things? Democrats have to really start examining their policies overseas, and all of that money that's being given left and right, whether the $7 trillion to the defense industry, to the Pentagon, the billions of dollars giving to dictators around the world, while our people here at home are slipping more and more into poverty. Mothers cannot go anymore. I mean, this pandemic wiped out millions of dollars, generational, basically, income, especially of black and brown people, and especially women. And they're unwilling to address this issue in the name of what? What security Israel guarantee for whom? When we know that from documents, from the Pentagon documents or 9/11 Commission, we know that this is the number one issue that radicalized people historically across the Middle East. So they're lying to themselves, they're lying to us, and this is corruption on steroids.
Rula Jebreal, we certainly appreciate you joining us. Folks, please follow her on social media. You definitely want to get her analysis. Like I said, I've been trying to get her on our show for quite some time, so certainly glad we could make it happen. Rula, let's do it again.
Yes, anytime. Thank you.
Thanks a lot.
It's time to be smart.
Roland Martin's doing this every day.
Oh, no punches!
Thank you, Roland Martin, for always giving voice to the issues.
Look for Roland Martin in the whirlwind, to quote Marcus Garvey again.
The video looks phenomenal, so I'm really excited to see it on my big screen.
Support this man, Black Media. He makes sure that our stories are told.
See, there's a difference between Black Star Network and Black-owned media and something like CNN.
I got to defer to the brilliance of Dr. Carr and to the brilliance of the Black Star Network.
I am rolling with Roland all the way.
Honored to be on a show that you own. A black man owns the show.
Folks, Black Star Network is here.
I'm real revolutionary right now. Roland was amazing on that.
Stay black. I love y'all.
I can't commend you enough about this platform that you've created for us to be able to share who we are, what we're doing in the world, and the impact that we're having.
Let's be smart. Bring your eyeballs home.
You can't be Black-owned media and be scared. You dig?